Hello, I'm Amanda Walker and welcome to Inside America. In today's episode, boat bombings off the coast of Latin America. Are they justified? Are they legal? US military strikes have killed more than 50 people so far. The Trump administration says it's a war on drugs.
Every terrorist thug smuggling poisonous drugs into the United States of America, please be warned that we will blow you out of existence.
With an apparent focus on Venezuelan boats in particular, is there a wider objective at play? September 2nd, the first strike on an alleged drug boat bound for the US. The footage, posted by President Trump, had an accompanying message. Please let this serve as notice to anybody even thinking about bringing drugs into the United States of America. Beware. But this was no one-off warning. The past 2 months have seen strikes on multiple boats in the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific, killing dozens of people. The president says the strikes are a matter of national self-defense, claiming without evidence that drugs from the region were responsible for 300,000 US deaths last year.
This is a national security problem.
Well, joining me now is Sarah Yager, the Washington director of Human Rights Watch, and Derek Maltz, who has spent decades in drug enforcement, including a spell as the acting head of the US Drug Enforcement Agency under Donald Trump. Thank you both for joining us. Sarah, let me start with you. These images of these strikes are becoming more frequent, more familiar, it seems. How would you characterize what we're witnessing?
Entirely unlawful is how I would characterize this. And I'm worried that people are being normalized to what amount to extrajudicial killings.
And Derek, how would you, from your background, your experience, just give us a sense of how these vessels are identified?
Well, there's a lot of intelligence. There's multiple agencies that are collecting intelligence. This isn't anything new. These boats have been leaving the coast of Venezuela because Venezuela is a command and control hub for global drug distribution, not just into America, but to all over the world, the Europe market, the West African market, and obviously there is an unholy alliance in Venezuela between the corrupt leaders in Venezuela with the narco-terrorists in Colombia, the FARC and the ELN. So they've been operating with impunity for 2 decades. So, I mean, obviously there's a lot of drugs moving around the world. And by the way, coca production right now in Colombia is at all-time high. So the narco-terrorists are taking total advantage of the markets around the world, not just in the U.S.
But specifically Venezuela, a question to you both. We're talking about fentanyl, really, because that is the primary cause of drug overdose deaths in America. Fentanyl not coming through out of Venezuela, largely coming out of Mexico.
That's my understanding. But look, I would not diminish the problem with the drug trade. And I would not diminish the problem with cartels, especially when it comes to the United States and overdoses. What I am arguing is that this way of going about it, where there is lethal targeting of boats coming from Venezuela or Colombia, is unlawful. And it really, I worry about the United States and international law. I worry about our U.S. military personnel violating international law. This is just not the way to do it.
Derek, where's the evidence for who is on these boats and what is on these boats? Why aren't we seeing more of that? If the White House, the Trump administration is so confident in this, why are we not hearing more about the evidence that a lot of people are saying just isn't there?
Good question, and I would direct you to the White House on that one, but I'm hopeful because the president made a comment this past week that he expects that Secretary of War Hegseth would go to Congress and provide more transparency on the actual vessels and what they're seizing, who they're killing and stuff like that. But I want to clarify something for the record. This is not overdoses we're seeing in America. This is a mass poisoning against this country. We've never seen anything like this in the history of this country. I've been talking about this for over 8 years. I talked to the families that are burying their babies, literally infants, 3 months old, 2 months old, a year old. We've never had this happen. If you took ISIS, you took Hezbollah, you took Al-Qaeda, you can't even come close to the amount of deaths to American families over the last 10, 15 years. So we're not talking about overdosing. These kids are being deceived to death, and the enemies of this country are harming our citizens like we've never seen before.
I think you're both, sorry, one second, Sarah, you're both in agreement that this is a huge problem.
There's a difference. So overdose and poisoning is two different things.
Right.
This is a poison.
There is clearly a big drugs problem. But
Yes.
I think, Sarah, your point is that this is not the way to solve it. What would you like to see different here in terms of the approach?
Well, can I just go back quickly to the evidentiary aspects of this? I would love to see Secretary Hegseth come to Congress and show the evidence. However, even if these are drug smugglers, you cannot just kill them. The president cannot decide to kill people when and where he likes. That is a dangerous precedent to set around the world. Imagine if China decides that it wants to kill Americans in the Pacific Ocean. The drug smuggling is not a reason to create war. It is actually not a condition of war. And so these lethal strikes are just entirely unlawful. I would say that there are a number of things that could be done, and I actually deferred to Derek on the things that could be done through law enforcement. Law enforcement and the military are two very different things, and they're separated for a good reason.
Derek, you are a man of the law. To Sarah's point, can you just go out and kill people like this? Surely
So
not.
DEA and our law enforcement counterparts, and I ran the Special Operations Division for 10 years. I grew it from 9 to 30 agencies, so I worked very closely with SOCOM and SOUTHCOM and the intelligence community. But you have to understand, the law enforcement mission is to collect the evidence, to prosecute the traffickers, to prosecute the criminals, and bring them before the court, and to have them, pursuant to the law and order of our America, right, the rule of law, and we want to see them prosecuted. However, this administration has said from the beginning, even during the election, that they are going to hold these criminals accountable for killing Americans at record levels. So that's their decision. The president and the Secretary of War, the State Department, and the administration have decided that prosecuting these narco-terrorists is not good enough. It's not working. We're losing too many Americans. So they're trying other, techniques of using the military, using other tools of national power.
But how do we know that they're criminals? Because I want to point to something that Senator Rand Paul said, who's been very critical of this, a Republican. He recently said that a 2024 Coast Guard report found that 27% of drug boat searches came back empty-handed. And as a former DEA administrator, what do you make of that? Does that chime with what you've experienced? No. And what does it mean for these Venezuela boat strikes?
So what I would say is that we know, we've been following it closely. I mean, we did the indictments on some of the major Venezuelan criminals, okay, and the military officials that have been guarding these loads for years. What I would say is that the Secretary of War, the Secretary of State, the law enforcement agencies, the intelligence community have the evidence on these vessels and have actually seized. Like the Dominican Republic, for example, they held a press conference. They found like 400 bales of drugs that were floating in the ocean, and they had a press conference. And I anticipate we're going to see more and more of the evidence that they recovered. And I mean, I think that's important, to be honest. I think that the American public deserves, the transparency when we do this stuff and to explain it. But it's been really clear to me that the current administration is not going to tolerate the death and destruction of our families and our communities. And these are not drug traffickers. I want to be really clear. These are terrorists. I've been asking for the administration to declare them terrorists, and Trump won, and it didn't happen. But these are terrorists. And Jim Rao, the father who started the Families Against Fentanyl, says it best. This is a weapon of mass destruction. We've never seen this kind of death in our country from any chemical weapon, by the way. I'm not aware of any chemical weapon that's killed this many Americans. So this is different. This is not the same old drug crisis. This is much different, and this is why it's being handled a little differently.
Sarah, this is really gaining momentum, this whole operation, it feels like. Is it too late for checks and balances?
No, it's not. No, it is never too late for checks and balances. But I was with Derek on arrest, on prosecution. I was with you all the way up until you said that the president gets to make this decision about how to handle. That is not actually true. The Congress has to declare a war and has to authorize the use of military force. So within law enforcement, yes, those are President Trump's decisions. Within using the military for a war, no, that is not President Trump's decision.
So where is Congress in all of this?
So that's a great point. So let me make this really clear. I've never been involved in making a decision to use kinetic strikes. I don't even know, and I never even talked about what the authorities are for the president, but I'm confident, as President Trump said, Marco Rubio is probably, according to this president, the best Secretary of State we've ever had. So I'm very confident in their knowledge and their research and the lawyers that work with their team to make, you know, the recommendations so they can act properly and lawfully.
I think the words are being thrown around a lot. Terrorism, narco trafficking, narco-terrorism. Narco-terrorism is not a legal term. It is not in U.S. law. Terrorism has to do with political violence. This is not political violence. This is a law enforcement issue.
But these are strong words. They are words that back up what they're doing right now. How much of this is shock and awe?
I mean, they're using these words in order to create an armed conflict that does not exist. This is a made-up term, and they are creating a made-up armed conflict in order to be able to kill people. And that is devastating to the rule of law.
Derek, at this point, though, do you think that what's happening is legal? And if not, what message does that send to the rest of the world?
Again, I'm not in a position, I have never evaluated the legality of it.
You must have a view on it.
I have a view on it, and I've been saying it really clear. Those terrorists need to be treated as terrorists because our families are suffering, and I have first-hand information to make that statement because I deal with the families, okay? I help make the collages. The DEA has the Faces of Fentanyl exhibit with thousands of kids on the wall. They don't even have enough room to put the dead kids on the wall.
Okay.
So, and I'm involved with these projects. So yeah, I think they need to be dealt with aggressively. I'm very pleased with the aggressive, techniques that we're using, but I want to see more. I want to see the captures and the prosecutions of El Mencho in Mexico, the leader of CJNG. I want to see Maduro out of power in Venezuela, because not only is he harming the world with his drugs, but he's harming the citizens of Venezuela.
Sarah, what's happening here has been referred to as outright murder, as extrajudicial killings. What message does it send to the rest of the world if America is behaving in this way?
So there's an incredible amount of suffering in the world, including what Derek just mentioned. There are tools to address that suffering depending on what the suffering is, who is causing it, and who should be held accountable. What I am saying is that the tools currently being used by the president are not appropriate. And we have these international laws that the United States helped create, which protect all of us, protect U.S. citizens, protect people in other countries, because a state cannot just go and kill who it wants to, when it wants to, for whatever reason it wants to. That's a safety for us. And if we're going to start crippling that and degrading it, it actually is a danger for all of us. So yes, there are tools that the president can use. There are sanctions, there are financial tools. But by creating this made-up conflict and calling them terrorists, it is really inappropriate, and I think it puts us all in danger.
Okay. Sarah, Derek, thank you both so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching this episode of Inside America. We'll see you next time.